Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webinar in the Epidemic and Pandemic Preparedness Program webinar series, organized by the Global Health Institute at the American University of Beirut. My name is Rima Alaaddin, and I'm a research associate at the Epidemic and Pandemic Preparedness Program. Today's webinar, Preparedness Beyond Borders, will focus on strengthening national and regional collaborations for disaster risk reduction in the MENA region. Please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box below during the session, and we will attend to your questions at the end of the webinar. We are honored to have with us today Mr. Zahi Shaheen, an expert in disaster risk management and resilience building, with a proven record in both national and international capacities. Mr. Shaheen is the head of the Disaster Risk Management Unit at the Presidency of the Council of Ministers with UNDP Lebanon, where he leads national efforts to strengthen preparedness and crisis response. He has been instrumental in integrating disaster risk reduction into national development strategies, and has played a key role in Lebanon's response to major crises, including the COVID-19 pandemic, the Beirut port explosion in 2020, and the 2024 war. Beyond Lebanon, Mr. Shaheen has worked across the Arab region as Chief of the Regional Office for Arab States with the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. Mr. Shaheen has also held leadership positions in economic development and has served as Director General of the Chamber of Commerce, Industry, and Agriculture of South Lebanon, contributing to regional economic growth and business resilience. Mr. Shaheen holds a master's degree in law and business, providing a strong foundation in governance, policy development, and strategic planning. We are thrilled to have him with us today to share his insights. And Mr. Shaheen, welcome for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and I'm honored to be here with all of you, and thank you again, Global Health Institute, for such amazing webinars organized by your side, and it's always an added value to the work we do and to the work that we are all involved in. To be honest, talking about strengthening national and regional collaboration for disaster risk reduction in the MENA region, it's a story that goes back to years and years, especially when it comes to Lebanon and the importance of this collaboration for a country such as Lebanon, with very limited capacity, very limited support coming from the system itself to disaster risk reduction. I believe Lebanon is not that different from the rest of the Arab region and Arab states when it comes to investing enough in preparedness and prevention. We're more tending into investing effort and money in mitigation and response, and we lack capacity, we lack planning, and we lack huge efforts that should be invested in recovery. Here, I'm gonna talk very generally, actually, about this collaboration in the MENA region, some of the success stories, and some of the action plans set in place in the last years for the region. And then I'm gonna give some examples about disasters and crises that we all lived in the last years, and how this collaboration actually saved and supported and strengthened the response in Lebanon. Some of those events were responses and crisis, cross-border crisis that we were suffering from, all as globally as countries around the world or in the region. So if I can move to slide 1, please. So as we all agree, disasters know no borders. And when we talk about climate change, when we talk about disasters, natural disasters that we're all witnessing, and the increasing in the level of those disasters around the world, I believe we don't need any more lectures about disasters being linked to specific borders that we just draw on maps. It's something that the whole world should sit together and the whole world should plan together. And if I want to focus more on our region, it's something that's that brought back the level of alert to a whole new level, especially when we talk about specific hazards. hazards like droughts, hazards like landslides, hazards like earthquakes that we're all witnessing. The increasing in the occurring of earthquakes in the region is being crazy lately. The shortage of water, forest fires. So we're talking about many hazards that should bring all Arab states and MENA region together to focus more on joining efforts and boosting the collaboration and the planning together. So here we're talking about transboundary risks from natural disasters to pandemics, conflicts affecting multiple countries, requiring coordinated responses. We're talking about shared challenges, especially and namely climate change, water shortage, and seismic risks impact to the entire MENA region. We're talking about the need for collaboration, how we can bring a stronger cross-border partnership, enhancing preparedness, response, and recovery to the region. We're talking about the regional strategies. And later on through the presentation, we're going to give some examples about success stories of developing strategies on the level of the Arab states, supported by UN agencies and supported by the Arab League for the Arab League for Arab States. So we're talking about a joint early warning system, mutual aid agreements, and information sharing, which is by far, and especially after the response to COVID, which was, I think, in the last 100 years after the Spanish flu, was one of the biggest global pandemic responses that highlighted the importance of information sharing, data collection, data gathering, and basing decision making and measures taken on data and on statistics being developed by the countries and by international organizations. Next, please. And please, for everyone, please feel free to interrupt at any moment if there's a specific question about something that I'm sharing. And I know at the end of the session we have a Q&A part of this webinar. But again, I wouldn't mind any question in between. So to start with where we stand by as Lebanon at this moment, Lebanon has adopted the main global agendas when it comes to, or that tackles disaster risk reduction, from Paris Agreement of the climate change, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and disaster risk reduction, Sendai. Sendai is the bigger kind of umbrella for disaster risk reduction that came this international agenda came right after Hugo, where we switched from disaster management to disaster risk reduction, taking into consideration the goals of the Sustainable Development Goals and setting targets for countries around the world to reach and to report to. All these agendas together focused mainly on reducing vulnerability and enhancing resiliency. Again, here when we mention resiliency, and this is something that we need all to agree on, that resiliency is not about how we define it sometimes in Lebanon, living the same crisis and the same disaster over and over, and knowing exactly what should be done during a response, as much as building a resiliency that will lead to building back better, that will lead to facing the same crisis or disaster when it comes to natural, for example, disasters occurring every year with limited damages compared to the one before, to protect people, to protect properties. So resiliency should come from limitation of the hazard itself, which will lead to disaster risk reduction. And again, the whole equation that Sendai put in place, where $1 in preparedness and prevention will save us $7 in response, I believe is an enough indicator and enough goal to set, to know exactly where we should be investing and where we should be spending money on when it comes to disaster risk reduction. Next, please. So here I'm gonna just go very quickly before getting into the overall regional collaboration and coordination on disaster risk reduction and disaster management. I want to just explain how the level of alert and the operation rooms is being operated in Lebanon. We're talking about 4 different levels of alert. We're talking about an alert on the local level when it comes to municipal or CASA level, which is a very limited kind of a disaster where the resources and the capacity of the municipality itself or the CASA is enough to interfere, to establish or to activate a specific response on the level of the community. For sure, the support is always there from the rest of the levels, especially sectoral, regional, and national. But here, the rest of the operation rooms are not activated. So it's a level where we call it the CASA level. Sectoral level is when we're facing a disaster or a crisis linked directly to a specific sector. We're talking about health, but health with a very limited, not a pandemic or epidemic national crisis like the one we faced in 2022, which was the cholera outbreak, which was a crisis that was handled by the Ministry of Public Health alone. It was supported by the rest of the government administrations and ministries, but handled again on the level of the sector by itself. We're talking about regional responses where the governor is responsible for leading on the response through his operation room, through his or her operation room and regional committee, where we have all the ministries and armed forces focal points represented at this committee. And then when it comes to the national level, we're talking about a national response led by the Prime Minister himself, where the National Operation Room and the national committees are activated like the one we just witnessed during the war. Here, the question is always about at which of those levels can we activate the regional and national intervention and support. And through the years and through the experiences that we went through, from forest fires to landslides to oil spills, all the way up to the port explosion and the war that we witnessed in the last year, I believe on each and every level, we can seek support, help, coordination, and collaboration with neighboring countries and regional and countries in the region, from Arab states to just close countries like Cyprus, Italy, France, and the rest of the European countries. I believe it's all about how we plan for it. Again, this kind of collaboration and partnerships usually is translated through either MOUs or bilateral agreements of support between the countries, or just requests of support that will come on an ad hoc level during a response to a crisis or during a response to a specific event. I think communication here is a key. We need to understand how to boost and to bring the communication during crisis to a whole new level in the country. And that's what exactly the RM at the Grand Sarai was working on for the last years. We're talking about, when we say communication, we're talking about the right terminology to be used between the countries so we can understand the message clearly on the kind of support and the level of support needed. We're talking about communication, including the digital communication, where we can be sharing data, where we can be sharing platforms and dashboards. We were talking about communication between governments and how it should be done, and is there any way of kind of bypassing some of the regulatory kind of communication between the countries, where can limit the ability of a very quick communication if you want to go through the system and the bureaucracy of a system of communication between countries. Next, please. So what's the key challenges that we face usually when it comes to regional collaboration, especially in our region, in the Arab region? Usually, and most important one, is the political and diplomatic constraints, where a lot of cases is about sometimes it's about, for example, which is very evident when we talk about the MENA region in general, is the relationship with and the limitation of the Palestinian, for example, state to be supported or to get support from because of the occupation. We're talking about some of the political and diplomatic problems between Arab states themselves. Some of the Arab states, they don't join efforts. They don't even accept to be on the same round table when it comes to planning and developing strategies together, all the way to some cases where the whole diplomatic channel is blocked between countries. We're talking about financial and resource limitations, and that will be applicable for most of the Arab states. We have some exceptions, and by some I really mean some. We should not always be driven by what we used to say for the last years, that the Gulf has no limitation on financial and resource when it comes to investing in disaster risk reduction. They are suffering as much as the rest of the Arab states are suffering. And here, when we say limitation, it does not mean that the limitation is linked to the availability of fund as much as a limitation in the planning. So the budget itself for a ministry or a sector to invest in disaster risk reduction is limited by itself, and that will bring us back to the whole advocacy and planning on the national level for governments to invest and to understand the importance of investment in disaster risk reduction. Lack of standardized response protocols. How do we activate this? How do I communicate or send a message to another Arab state or a neighboring country, explaining exactly what's needed, what kind of support is needed, what kind of response am I leading on? This kind of standardized protocol is needed. Sometimes we go all the way to put a clear doctrine of activation of such requests. For example, we have Lebanon is lucky enough to benefit from what's called the EU mechanism of support through the ERCC in Brussels, where since 2017 we activated this mechanism more than 7 times. But again, when it comes to communicating the need to the EU mechanism of support, you need to use a very clear standardized response protocols, explaining the need, explaining the situation, and requesting very specific support. You cannot just ask for support or intervention without being very specific, and take full liability as a country of any support that will be provided. Coordination difficulties across countries. And here we're talking about what we all witness, even in the country itself, when it comes to coordination between ministries, coordination between agencies, coordination between different sectors. The coordination itself is always complicated when it comes on who's leading on this coordination, what kind of coordination is it, what limitation is there on this coordination. So again, this is all linked to a regional dialogue about the approach of coordination when it comes to disaster risk reduction, with highlighting the importance of this dialogue to take into consideration the four pillars of disaster risk reduction and disaster management, from preparedness, prevention, response, and recovery. So this support and this collaboration and coordination should continue through all pillars, and not just through response itself or the early recovery afterwards. Next, please. The best practices in the region, if I can call it best practices in regional cooperation, we're talking about the establishment of regional technical groups. That's something that was supported by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the regional office in Cairo, bringing all Arab states together under the umbrella of Sendai to start putting in place what they called volunteering groups from different sectors, from different from different portfolios. So we had the development of what they call the Arab STAG, which is the Arab Science and Technology Arab groups, bringing together a group of professional and exceptional kind of experienced people from all Arab region, putting their experience, putting their education, putting their knowledge in how to enhance and how to develop an early warning system for the Arab states and for the region, linked to early actions that should be taken by each and every state. And that so far is an excellent example of best practices. We have the volunteering groups for youth, we have volunteering groups for women, and we have hopefully what we will see it will be launched very soon, the common early warning system or the joint early warning system for the Arab states. We have the data and resource sharing mechanisms. Again, that was supported by UNDRR, that was supported by the EU through the PPRD program and through the Union for Mediterranean program, and the DJ ECHO, that brought all the expertise and lessons learned from European countries, from African countries, from North American countries to the region, to bring the importance, to highlight and to teach how we do data and resource sharing. It's not yet on a level where we can say it can serve the purpose of this mechanism, but at least we're on the right track. We're on the road. We're moving very slowly in the region when it comes to this, but it's there. We have something tangible. We have something going on. We have the shared training and capacity building. This part is really growing in the last years between Arab states, joint trainings and joint capacity building events are being held and organized on yearly basis for different events, for different pillars. And this is, in my point of view, one of the best examples to give is what we're gonna be participating in next week, which is the 6th Arab State Partnership meeting for disaster risk reduction. It will bring together the people to see each other, to know that who is responsible in each and every Arab state about different subjects and different part of responses. It's bringing together people to know and to understand how the mechanism in different countries is being operated, which will simplify and bring new tools of coordination in an easier way between countries. And we're talking about joint response exercises. Here we're talking about those exercises taking place on bilateral agreements or on a very specific subject or support. Lebanon is part of those exercises. Last year, if I want to go like a bit bigger than the region or the Arab states, Lebanon is participating in a lot of those exercises with the EU, with specific or on bilateral kind of approach with Cyprus, with Italy, with Spain, with Egypt, so with Jordan, with Turkey, which led at one point to the first mission that I will stop by during my presentation later on, to the first international mission for search and rescue for Lebanon outside the borders. Next, please. So the role of national and regional actors, who is responsible for enhancing and increasing and support the coordination and collaboration in the region on disaster risk reduction? We're talking about governments, with the role governments should play in policy and legal frameworks to be in place, to be adopted, to be developed in many countries. A lot of countries, they even lack the having a national strategy for disaster risk reduction. A lot of countries have those strategies on papers, never been approved or adopted by the government. We're talking about the NGOs in the region, bringing the community engagement and response. One of the best examples for this part is the Red Cross, the UN agencies, coordination and technical support. And with all what UN agencies are bringing to the table, from knowledge to financial support and supporting government institutions and ministries in what they do, to the private sector when it comes to innovation and funding. And here, I believe what we should all be hoping for is a bigger role of the private sector in the future and the coming years in disaster risk reduction. Private sector is, I believe, if I don't want to put it on the same level of the government, but as important as the role of the government in creating a solid and structured disaster risk reduction system and mechanism within countries and on the level of the region. Next, please. The MENA region strategies and frameworks. We have one of the most important documents that's been developed for the region and adopted by Arab states is the Arab Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction 2030. Again, if you look at all the global agendas, and to add to it, the Arab Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction is all linked to the 2030 agenda. So it's a success story by itself, but in the same time, we need to be very careful on how things globally and on the level of the region will move on after 2030. Are we talking about the same agendas to be renewed or kind of updated, or are we talking about an integration of all and different agendas in one a global umbrella. Maybe it will be the SDGs to bring all the agendas together. Maybe it's a new kind of global agreement that will bring all these agendas to one platform, one global platform. And the region should be very involved and very active to match how globally things are moving on, to be able to link its strategies and frameworks to the global ones. And then we have the Sendai framework implementation in the MENA region, again led by the UNDRR, on the reporting on all targets of Sendai. This reporting is not just linked to the adoption of a specific country to the Sendai framework of action, as much as to evaluate the improvement on the level of the country in disaster risk reduction. The tools being developed by UNDRR for such reporting are amazing and being updated on yearly basis. So if I take, for example, the disinventar itself, it's this system of reporting for damages that will help you in looking back of the history of crisis and disasters that you faced in the country, and the level of damage and effect that this crisis or disaster left on your communities and left on the system overall at a specific country. And in the same time, it will give you and it will reflect what's being done in different countries, to build on, to share the experience on, and to communicate on with different states. And that by itself can regulate over the years the whole communication and collaboration between the states and the region. Next, please. So if I can give some tangible examples in Lebanon and how it was linked and what was the added value of the regional collaboration to the responses to those events in Lebanon, I will start with forest fires. Forest fires, it's a yearly crisis that we live over and over. And we know that it will continue as far as we have forests. Hopefully that we will be investing in foresting, and we will be investing in bringing back at least the minimum percentage of green area in Lebanon to where we were 20 and 30 and 40 years ago. But forest fires is one of those hazards where most of the Arab region suffers from. We all witnessed what happened in Tunisia and Morocco last year. It's exactly what we faced in Lebanon in 2019 on a much bigger scale. Forest fires, for example, is one of those hazards where the support and the collaboration on the region level is very clear. So the support when it comes to the response is a support that that many of the times is being translated in extra planes or helicopters to be sent to a specific country. Like for example, in 2019, with the huge forest fires that we witnessed, we had to activate two bilateral agreements, one with Jordan and one with Egypt, to send extra planes and extra firefighters to Lebanon. We activated the EU mechanism of support, so we received support from Cyprus, Italy, and France with forest fires planes. And we activated actually the support with Syria to control the forest fires that were reaching the borders between the two countries. So it was an excellent experience of collaboration and support and coordination between Arab states for a specific response. Next, please. COVID-19 will take us to a whole new level where the response was coordinated globally. We saw global measures being set and implemented by countries around the world. We saw leadership of WHO as a UN agency in developing the response or putting in place the sectors that should be tackled in the response for COVID-19 as a pandemic. In the region, it was a system that was implemented for the first time, a digital system that we're looking at right now, the COVID-19 risk level dashboard that Lebanon shared with the rest of the countries in the region to control the positive cases coming in and out of the country. At the beginning of the pandemic, everyone want extremists to an extreme level of measures to close the borders, to isolate countries from each other. But after a period of time where this action was no longer reasonable to continue with because people needed to move from a country to another. This system linked together the cases and the movement of cases, positive cases between countries and specifically in the Arab states. Next, please. The Beirut explosion, we're talking about this case where we had a response to a huge event such as the Beirut port explosion. In less than 30 minutes, we had more than 220 dead people in the streets. We had a huge part of the capital being destroyed by an explosion that been leveled at one point as the third biggest explosion after the two nuclear bombs during the World War II. And you had to respond as a country to such a crisis in no time with very limited capacity. So without the intervention of the countries in the region and European countries in the response, it was going to be a super hard operation to do, especially when we talk about search and rescue. We're talking about people being buried under the rubble, people get stuck under demolished houses and buildings. So you needed every single effort to be on the ground. And that was a success story of communication, of crisis communication during risks from Lebanon to neighboring countries and the rest of the countries in putting in place the real needs. Those needs were being updated every single hour in the first week, saying that this is the number of search and rescue officers needed, and this number was updated till we reach a time where we said no more need for search and rescue teams to be coming to the countries. Now we need more support in the stock of hospitals. Now we need more support in mass casualties, dead bodies management. So it was very controlled when it comes to the need Lebanon was projecting and sending to other countries in the region. Next, please. So this early response was built on a very clear what we called at that point the short-term response framework for the port explosion, where the EU mechanism of support, as you can see, was activated the really next the next day after the port explosion, when it was evident that the scale of crisis we're dealing with, it's much bigger than Lebanon by itself capacity to deal with, and even the capacity of the Arab states support that might be sent to Lebanon. Next, please. And here, actually, to add one more thing that we witnessed during the port explosion, we witnessed during the forest fires, and we witnessed during the war that we lived in the last month, is the flash appeal. For people who were involved or participated in the flash appeal is one of those tools used by countries and used by OCHA from the UN for humanitarian support. This humanitarian support through the flash appeal is one of an excellent examples for regional and global collaboration and coordination in response to crisis, where a country supported by OCHA or a country by itself can put together a flash appeal, bringing a whole explanation of the situation, bringing detailed needs to be projected to the countries around the world about the suffer of a specific from a specific event, the people affected, the number of those people, the number of or the scale of damages on the level of the country, and what kind of humanitarian support is needed, and what's the dollar value for such a support. Next, please. Earthquakes was, and why I'm mentioning earthquakes here, because it was one of the success stories for Lebanon, where for the first time in the history of the country, Lebanon sent a search and rescue team to support Turkey during the earthquake. We can see it in the next slide, where it was so a team that you see in the picture participated in the national search and rescue in Turkey. This team was dispatched after less than 12 hours of the earthquakes that hit in Turkey, assisting the Turkish authorities and search and rescue teams that came from different countries to the country in looking for people stuck under buildings. One of the success stories of this team, that they were dispatched to a remote area where the area itself was 90% destroyed from the earthquake. The team was there in a -16 and were able to save 3 citizens from under the rubbles after a 48 hours of an earthquake with a 16 degrees minus weather. So it was one of those operations, miracle operations to accomplish. Next, please. So how do we strengthen the collaboration over everything that was mentioned? What should be done? And here, when I say what should be done, we're talking about, again, what should be done on the level of the governments, the private sector, the NGOs, the UN systems. And I think this is the importance of such webinars, to discuss together and to plan together on each and every one of us role, on each and every one of us added value to the system itself, to the mechanism itself of collaboration. So more development of regional agreements for disaster response should take place and should be developed in the region. And again, here I'm talking about bilateral or regional agreements that will bring together all the Arab states in one document, to enhance the information sharing platforms. And those platforms, most of the times, are linked to governments and to agencies responsible for such responses within those countries. Invest in joint training and exercises, and that will enhance to a whole new level the coordination and collaboration between agencies within the countries. So in case of a joint operation, they know how they operate, they know how to communicate, they know how to deal between each other in response in the field, and to secure funding for cross-border initiatives. We are just used for those initiatives to come from the European side. We are just used for those initiatives to take place within the African continent. But again, those initiatives are needed. Those initiatives, and some of those initiatives that took place in the last years were excellent, but still not on the level of satisfaction that should be in the Arab states. And I don't believe there's any limitation for such initiatives to take place, because if we just compare it to other sectors and other, for example, economic and agricultural, for example, initiatives taking place, I believe that disaster risk reduction is not nuclear physics that should be complicated to be implemented in these initiatives. Next, please. So that's all from my side. I'm really sorry that I had to speak for 40 minutes straight, but I thought I'll give you my experience in the last years about some of the success stories in the region, and some of the success stories and struggles that we lived in national responses for the last years in many of the disasters and crises that we witnessed. So I'm open for any question. I want to thank you so much for organizing this
Thank you so
session,
much.
and it's always an honor for me to be with GHI in these webinars, and it was a pleasure to meet all of the attendees.
Thank you so much. On behalf of GHI and the team, I also want to sincerely thank you for your valuable insights and expertise. I'm sure we all have a lot to reflect on after this webinar. Thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in our future webinars. Since there are no questions, we can go ahead and conclude today's session. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.